Okay, so now I'm going to introduce a new concept, and it's called functions. Ruby functions, also known as methods. I'm not sure in other languages if they just like to say functions, but in Ruby, they're mostly known as methods. And they're essentially another tool to organize your code and make sure that you can reuse your code or perhaps add a certain abstraction to it. And abstraction is just a big word for concept, something that you want your program to do for you, maybe over and over or for a specific reason. They're a little bit hard to understand if you don't have a problem you want to solve, but the best way to get introduced to them is just to see what kind of behavior they have. I like to think of them as a sort of a wrapper or sort of a container for code that you want to use and pass it around perhaps, or call it. Like those are the terms that you'll hear a lot, calling a method. And it's essentially referencing that code. So in fact, I'm going to just run this right here just to see what happens. Does anybody know what kind of crazy stuff might happen here? Does anybody have any idea what the purpose of that could be? Yes.
It's addition function. So you're adding two numbers together.
Right. And how does that happen?
So the name of the function is called add, and you have two parameters, a and b. And within that function, what it's doing is adding a plus b, but you're also returning it. So you're giving back the result to whenever you call that function.
Yes. So a lot is happening here, actually. And we can break this down into simpler terms. The idea is that by the time you know methods, you understand everything that is going on here. So let me move on to something that maybe makes a little bit more sense, and it's not just variables and letters. So I'm going to start with an array, and I'm going to call it a bag of fruits. It's pretty self-explanatory. So what's going on here, anybody? What is bag of fruits at its core in programming terms? An array of strings. Yeah. So it's just an array of strings. yeah. It feels like a trick question. I know. I'm sorry.
Start with the simple answer.
Yeah. That is a big thing on programming. Sometimes you overthink things. Sometimes you have to, but like sometimes the elegant answer is the simple one.
Yeah.
And it's tricky. So we're gonna have a bag of fruits, and we're gonna do stuff with it. And essentially, before we had the concept of methods, we would just write the code here saying, oh, I wanna output something to the user so that they know what's going on. So I would do something like this is very valid. This works. And so if I run this, it will work fine. But what if I want to have a method that returns that code? Because maybe I want to use it over and over again in the future. I don't know yet. But I don't want it to just run one time. I want it to be a tool I can use over and over. The syntax for that, as we saw before, is def. What goes after that is the name of the method. Make sure that just like variables, you can't have spaces. I'm not sure if you can have special characters after the first one. You might want to look up those rules. I actually don't remember. But you want to stick to just letters with underscores. And all lowercase. Thanks, Adam. And much like if statements, they have to have an and. Okay, so can anybody take a guess what would happen? What's going to happen if I just run this file right now? Does anybody know? Nothing. At least not on the output, right? And why is that?
Because there is no because that's roots is a function.
Yes.
No parameters.
Sorry?
They don't have parameters.
Okay.
They have parameters.
It does not. It is a fact that it doesn't have parameters, but that's not why it doesn't do anything. But that is a fact. Yes.
So you need to write a usage like root, then output eating root.
Yes. So you would have to call the method, and the way you call the method is just like that. Now it's Ruby has. I think it's exclusive to Ruby, right? Most other, maybe other languages define if it's a method or a variable. Usually,
What do you mean?
like this looks just like a variable right now. Like
That depends on the language as well.
okay. But a tricky thing about Ruby is that it looks just like a variable right now. And the only reason that you know it's not a variable is because it's defined up there as a method.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, in most languages, you at least have to, even if there's no arguments to the method, it doesn't take any parameters, you still have to provide like the parentheses or something to indicate.
Right.
But Ruby's flexible enough, you don't have to.
Yeah.
But I believe you can, right?
You can, but it's not. They don't like it. Yeah. Like yeah, you should. Yeah. Everybody frowns upon it. So, but you can. It is possible to do it. I did not save it. Thank you. For some reason, it's not saving. It's not the right file. That's why. All right, so that works. So here's the cool thing. What if I want to say it over and over? And just do that. And what's going to happen?
Maybe about 6 times.
Yes. Because it's reusing that code that is inside the method. Now, the way we think about it is that method eat a fruit returns puts eating a fruit. Now, what does that mean, returns? Does anybody know what does that mean, returns? Puts eating a fruit?
Like result.
Sorry?
Result.
Result? Yeah. So there's Ruby has a behavior where like the last line of a method is what gets returned. So unless you explicitly define what to return. And I'll give an example. If I run that, what's going to happen? Let me take off. Oh, that's too much.
Maybe trick. I think Control X means a line. I think
Control X. Okay.
maybe Command X on it. But
Got it. What's that?
I know if you're down here and you have to scroll, you can hear it where you at. But it doesn't do that there.
Here? No, no, because this would be the file you're editing. So it's whatever. How many? I did a bunch of enters on purpose just so it would not be on the screen. Yeah, but you can't really just clear just like the command line. So what do we think is going to happen here? Yep. So it's only going to print out eating the fruit. So what happened to number and thing?
Just say.
Yes, they just got assigned, correct. So here's the tricky thing now. What do we think is going to happen here?
Say, like eating of fruit.
Same thing, eating the fruit? Okay. Anybody else have different theory? All right. Yep, that's correct. Let me see. That's because of the return properties, right, of Ruby and
Because there's no output.
well, it's because you're not doing anything with the return value from this. So the puts here is actually a side effect. Like if you go straight to you're in IRB or in Pry or whatever,
yeah.
and if you did puts, like anything with hello, you'll see that what puts actually returns is nil. So even in our previous ones, what was happening was puts eating a fruit was going to the screen, and then the return from the function itself was nil.
Mm-hmm.
But since we're not doing anything with that value right now, it doesn't matter.
So, but if
You have to do right return next to one of
to which one? To this? That?
And
We're gonna have a lot of
then this is for nothing.
Nothing?
Yeah. And if you want to use the number, you have to make the number function in the other way. You make it that number
Mm-hmm.
and number is required and it can use it when you run it.
Like this?
Yes, and then inside the number required. I
think just you can put hashtag and number and
the so the curly brackets. What's that thing called?
yeah, one.
Let me first run. I want to first run this to see what happens if I run that. I gotta say. It's still eating the fruit, but it's probably returning something else, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little tricky. Let me see if I can reproduce this. What I'm trying to illustrate. So like if you call eat a fruit right now, what are we getting from eat a fruit? Do we know?
You printed on the screen, eating fruit, where you're also returning the number 5.
Right.
Let's try this. Do puts on your eat a fruit line, where you call it. Yeah. let's leave that in there for a little while, and we can go back and forth between the
Okay.
different return values.
Should I run it?
What do you think's gonna happen now?
Did you say?
Yes. It's a.
Five. Eating a fruit pie.
All right.
Let's see. Unit fruit 5. Yep. Now, the thing is that what is happening is this puts is getting executed as the method is running, right? And that's what outputs the eating of fruit. But as it stands right now, the method does not return anything but 5. So it's two different concepts. It's a little tricky to understand right now, but one gives you a result that you can hold on to, and the other one is what is getting executed down the line in the method. It's going to be a little tricky sometimes because you have a method that you think is doing a lot of things, but if you don't understand that difference, then it might trip you up as to what the method is actually doing. So just to keep things simple and avoid any problems for now, we're going to have a method that just does that one thing. And the one thing that it does is that it runs this code.
Now, if we ran that, what do you think would happen?
Yep. What do we think is going to happen if we run this? What's that? Eating the fruit. Okay. Nil. All right.
So it'd be eating fruit and then
Okay. All right. Let's see.
I guess it's
Yep. So it's both. It's eating the fruit and nil. Right. This is nil, right?
Should be, yeah.
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 It's a little loosey, yeah.
Yeah.
A little loosey, but yes.
And the reason is because nil is it's a side effect, right, of the method.
Well, nil is what
Puts.
got returned.
Yeah.
So puts has a side effect of writing something to the string, and then its return value is nil. Puts and gets are a little weird.
Yeah.
They don't. So while they're functions or methods, they work a little differently than other ones, and they're going to throw you off if you try and think about other methods the same way puts and gets work. Better to think of them as special cases for nil.
So another way actually to make this less confusing, you can just have this, and I think I have that as a second example. Okay, so yeah, this one is going to take an argument. And what is the difference here? What comes after the name? And they're usually called arguments or parameters. And can anybody take a guess as to why we need that to happen?
So, inside the name,
Yeah.
can be the eating or
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, that's right. So the way I think about parameters, and I'm not sure if it's the best term for computer terms, but the way I understand them is I understand it as a bridge. I think of methods as its own contained world, and then the outside world is unreachable right now. But how do I poke a hole from the outside into the inside? Is I create an argument where I can pass in things to it. That's why you hear the term pass in a parameter in a lot.
So one thing that is useful here on this specific thing is that you guys, everyone should be familiar with something like this. If you've taken algebra or any class like that, you've written, let's do something very, very basic, x plus 5. And you can put any value in for x and get a different result out. That's very similar to what's going on in a programming language with the arguments, except you get to name them whatever you want and pass a different amount. They can be more complex than that, but it's a very similar concept.
So what do we think is going to happen if I run this right now? Eat the fruit. Okay. And that is, but that is from the first method, right? Okay. Do we have an issue with the second one? Okay. So what do you think the problem is going to be? Okay. Let's see. It looks like it just did eating a fruit. Didn't call it. Yeah. So it ignored it, didn't run it. So how do I call it? All right. Now what do we think is going to happen? Yep. Wrong number of arguments, 0 for 1. What do we think that means?
2 and 4.
Arguments and
A method is expecting an argument, and you're not providing it. So we cannot work the function.
Yeah.
Because you cannot.
Right.
Because your method itself uses that parameter to process the information.
Yeah.
That the parameter should be.
Yep. Essentially, you're saying I created this method, and the only way this method works is if I get something from the outside world. Well, when I called this method, I didn't give it anything. How could it work? It doesn't know how to work if I don't give it anything. You're telling me I'm expecting a fruit, but you didn't give me a fruit. So that's why you get this error message. 0 for 1. I needed, in this one instance, I needed a fruit to work. And the way that it works is we need to pass in a parameter, right? The way that we do it in Ruby is we pass the fruit. What do we want the fruit to be? Doesn't really matter. It's not a trick question. Mango, okay. All right. And there it is. It works fine because you're passing in what you need in the method for it to run. Yes.
Can we combine it with each block to go through the list? Share with that, or
Yeah, that's a good question. Can we do an each block and combine it so that we can do this list?
Whatever. Fine. I'll quit writing that.
So why do you want the each loop? What do you want to do with a bag of fruits? You- Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're proposing, let's look at the bag of fruits and for each fruit inside, we're gonna output that. Okay? So pretty much like as you can see in human terms, it kind of reflects a little bit as to the methods that we want to use. We say we want to look at each of the items in the bag of fruits. What do we do? Like this?
Can I put the bag of fruit in the without instead of the mango?
Instead of the mango,
Yeah.
you want to pass the whole bag of fruits? Okay. All right. Let's see. We'll see.
This is the best way to learn, is to test stuff out and see what's going on.
Yeah. All right. So we have a proposal here saying, let's see if we can pass all of the fruits to the method. What do we think is going to happen?
Something.
Say, eating a apple banana orange grape.
Okay. It's maybe, maybe not. I mean, that's a good guess, honestly. Because what we're saying is, we're looking at the array of strings, we're going to concatenate it inside even A, right? So let's see what Ruby does with that. Sure enough, what do we think happened there? Yep, but in order to make this a little bit more accurate, let me see if I can enter try. So we have bag fruits, that's the array. And what the method is doing is calling to S to that variable. And it looks like that. And it takes this string and adds it to Eden A, which is, this is no longer an array. This is just a string representation of the array. Yes?
So for these methods, do you have to specify the type of the parameter? Like, for example, float, array, or string?
That's a good question. No, it could be anything. So you don't have to specify. Ruby just is not asking you to specify. So that is the flexibility of Ruby and the tricky thing of Ruby. You know, it's a give and take because you can do a lot of things.
So you have to be almost, I forgot the word, but validating all the data to make sure that you get the right input.
Yes, if you, sometimes, it depends on how you write your code. Because you can write your code in a way that you're abiding by some convention. And even in a way that, even if you have different types, it can do different things depending on the type that you get. And I mean, you may talk about that a little bit more, but it can be a little tricky to balance between being too flexible versus being too rigid, and the pros and cons for that.
Yeah, that's a continual debate in programming. That's why there's, maybe later on in another class, we'll talk about strongly typed languages, and I might just touch on them and give an example to show the difference. But I think it's useful to start without one that's strongly typed because it reduces the complexity of learning programming.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to learn without having to specify your type everywhere.
So that's not really what we want, right? Like, we don't want eating a bracket apple comma. That doesn't make any sense. What we want to do is output a line that says eating an apple, eating a banana, eating an orange, and so on. So what do we think the solution to that is? Sure.
So, are we defining a new one, or am I working with any of those?
Yes, either one.
Okay, so the first one, eating a fruit.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, the second one, eating fruit,
Yes.
and the fruit, whatever. If you want to loop through the array, I guess before the puts statement, definition, you could put the loop. Which would be,
Something like this.
it would have to be fruit, right? Fruit that each.
Fruit that each. Okay.
Isn't that a parameter though?
I don't know. Let's see. Let's follow along and see what's going on. So you're saying fruit that each. I mean, this is good. This is good. Okay.
I just like I for item or element.
Okay. So this is the variable for the block. Okay. Let me do an end. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the item inside of fruit. So what is fruit here?
That would be an array.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm assuming it's gonna
Okay.
have to be,
All right.
right?
So you're making an assumption that fruit is going to be an array. All right.
He says it, that I make an assumption.
No, it's fine. Please continue down your line of thinking. It's not a problem.
And then you would just say, put, basically, so
This line.
that line,
Okay.
but you would change the fruit inside that bracket to be I.
Okay. All right. So how do I call this now?
Instead of making it just
Bag of fruits. Okay. Anybody is a little bit lost as to what's going on, maybe the naming is throwing you off a little bit. But right now, the proposed solution is that I'm going to take the array bag of fruits. I'm going to pass it here, and I'm going to rename it so that it's easier to understand. And for each element of the bag of fruits, I'm going to put the string plus the element to string. Sure enough, that works. But what was the big change from before to now in that method?
Change the fruit to
Bag of fruits. Okay? Now, here's the interesting part. Do we think that's going to do something else? It will work too?
So the function, the way you call the function, you don't give on name word,
Mm-hmm.
to see inside of the off word.
Yeah.
And then version.
Okay. Let's see. Yep, it works the same. And so this is confusing. You probably wouldn't want to do this just because it confuses the programmer. but it illustrates the independence of the name inside of the method versus outside. Meaning that you can name this anything as long as it stays consistent inside of the method. It knows that that is just a placeholder for what you're passing in. And in this case, you're passing a bag of fruits. Note that you're not passing X. They're not named the same. But because the behavior that is expected is to take an argument, doesn't matter what the name is, and put it in that position, then now it knows that X is this thing. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions so far? Okay. Just because I am a big stickler on readability, I'm going to change these to.
Well, let's take it back and just do the plus, and let's instead take in a single fruit. And how would we do the same thing? Right?
So do the method which is one fruit.
You eat a named fruit, yeah. So it's just going to take one fruit. Right?
And let's see. You got it right originally?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone have any suggestions on how we would write this if we wanted that method to work that way? To only take a single fruit, but we still want to go through that array?
So you're saying, I think what you're saying is do the loop outside of the method.
Yeah, I'm just waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good.
So. What is your input again?
Do
I want the
this.
same output, but I want my function to take one fruit at a time. I want it to
Oh.
eat a single named fruit at a time. Oh, yeah.
I'm a bad teacher, giving away answers. Well, can anybody explain what the answer means? So I gave the answer, but what does it mean? What Jared is asking is, how can I reuse this method as it is and have the same behavior without changing it? Do the output of this, go through each one, just using this method without changing it. Sure. So over here we have the output of each element with the string. And we were using the previous method that had a loop inside of it. But the problem is we want, or the request is to use this method as it is, don't change anything to it, but instead use it to achieve this goal. So we know we can feed a fruit to this, no pun intended, to this method. So we know that it takes something and does something to it, but we want to do it many times based on a list.
So
What does that sound like?
you know, name fruits, neighborhood fruits, bracket 0. That's gonna be apple. And like 5 times.
Okay.
Or
All right, that's one way. Like I think I know what you're saying. You're saying access access the element directly, pass it.
But like the bottom,
Are we saying just call it 5 times
yeah.
directly?
So
So where we have eat a name fruit already.
same 5. This is a method you guys haven't seen, but it does what you're asking. So like this, something like that.
Yeah. But bracket 0 and 1.
Like that. Oh, the range. Is that something like what's in your mind a little bit?
Yeah, but it should be
4. Maybe. All right, let's see.
Oh, so the definition.
Yep, right here. Okay, so what happened here? Yeah.
Oh, then change the 5 to I equal 0, and I point times 2, and either name fruits, mango fruits, bracket I, and oh yeah.
Okay. So let me. It's a good train of thought because you got the loop, and you got calling the method inside of the loop. But the easiest way right now is that we know we can each through an array. So instead of doing 5 times, we already know that the array has 5 things. What do we think about that? Now that is the solution, but do we know what is happening here? Does anybody have a question as to why that works? There's a lot of fruit going on, but do we know the relationship between them?
So here we mango with each,
Yeah.
and then all the way. So we need to do the recipe information,
Yeah.
and then we accumulate it to the function, keep
Yeah. Yep. So this is the first item in the bag of fruits is going to be apple. So right now, fruit is apple, and specifically the string apple. And we're going to pass the string apple to the method eat a name fruit, which gets executed here and gets passed to this string. So are we confident that this is going to work? Okay. Sure enough, that works. And that's a lot cleaner right here. If we look at this code, it's a lot cleaner than if we wrote everything together, because it allows us to conceptualize different things, and it tells us exactly what it's doing. It's saying, I have a bag of fruits with a collection of things. I'm going to look at each one, And as I look at each one, I am going to do that method, which can have any sort of function inside of it. So this, I can even modify it. And I modify it only in one place. If I didn't have a method, I would have to do it 5 times in different lines. So if I run the same code again, it now knows that I can add it to the same method over and over. So methods afford you a lot of power in that way, in that once you know what functionality you're seeking, and you know that that's something that you're going to reuse over and over, it gives you a concept or a tool that you can pull over and over again in your code while also adding readability. Eventually, you can, and this is going to be in the later class, you can write your custom methods on things that you have created. And the concept of that is a class. I'm not going to get into classes today, but that is the relationship. You have an object or a class that has many actions or properties. So right now, this almost is like a person, right, that likes a lot of fruit. And so the person has the ability to eat a fruit. And the person has the ability to tell you a statement of the fruit that he's eating. So that would be kind of what the class would be in the future, that it has different behaviors attached to it. And just to like something that is interesting as you get along with programming, you know, you hear that in Ruby everything is an object, and it's kind of a very vague and general idea. But for example, we have, this is the same relationship here that you're going to eventually see. New is just something that is def, new, and somewhere in Ruby that is related to the thing string. So every time this happens, you're instantiating a thing outside of that class. I'm not going to get too much into it right now because it's a lot, but that's how you work your way up in the programming world. Methods are just different functions on things that either already exist in Ruby or you created. Does anybody have any questions? Sorry? I'm sorry, what was the question? Oh, down below, right here? This?
Does it have to have? You said that could be like, fruit could be something different. Like it doesn't have to be fruit, it could be like X or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But within. If you change it in the parentheses, you have to change it in the curly brackets too.
Right here, if I change this, you're saying?
Yeah, you have to change it in between the hashtag curly brackets or that,
Yeah.
right?
So it's No, that's a good question. It's a little tricky about scopes, right? And it takes time. You don't have to get it right now, but like it takes time to understand the different scopes of what's happening. And just to add another wrinkle here, just so that you can see what's going on. It is a fruit, so it works. Tomato is a fruit. But just to add another wrinkle to the problem, this fruit is not related to that at all.
Yeah, and
This is a contained world. So this is a world of its own. This is outside of that world. And also this is its own world. So the things that change in the method, everything inside of it have to change as well, because that's its own little universe. And so because this is outside of that universe, it doesn't matter as long as you're passing it in the same order. And I don't know if I should get into more arguments or not, but
Yeah, we're right at time already.
yeah.
I don't want to move people too long, so we're gonna go over, we'll go over some other examples of methods, functions in the next class. Scope questions are very good. I hadn't thought about making sure I covered those.
Mhm.
So we will definitely get into more detailed discussion on scope.
Yeah.
I might try and pre-sketch stuff, but scope is really easy for me on a whiteboard, so
Mhm.
I encourage anyone who's not, or who can make it to be in class, because I might whiteboard stuff out, which is harder to show on the video.
Right.
But yeah, scope would definitely be a good topic to go over, because scope is a complex concept.
For sure. Unless anybody else has any other questions, I think that covers some of it. We're gonna see this a lot. Methods you're gonna just see from now on in terms of the programming world. Just think of them as a tool to make your code cleaner, more usable, and it's just repetition in terms of how to use it. So, I think that should be it for me. Should I? Is the link to the homework?
I will be updating it. I've been updating it on the fly right now, adding more stuff. So this is going to, I mean, there's a lot in there. If you guys feel overwhelmed,